Her name was Maribel Cruz, and every weekday morning she rolled into Eastbrook High under a sky already warmed by the sun. She had learned to love daylight, the way it made everything feel possible, even when her own body often refused to cooperate. A spinal injury from a childhood accident had taken away her ability to walk, but it had not taken her quiet determination. She arrived early, navigated crowded hallways with practiced care, and spent lunches near the courtyard fountain where there was room to breathe. She had learned where to position herself so she wouldn't be jostled, how to smile politely when people stared, and how to lower her eyes when whispers floated too close. Most days, survival meant blending into the background, but some people never let others fade into safety. A small group of students had made Maribel their favorite target over the past few months, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she was different, and different felt easy to break. They mocked the way she moved, the slowness of her turns, the soft brace visible beneath her jeans. Teachers rarely caught it, and when they did, the bullies wore innocent faces. Maribel told herself to endure, counting days until graduation, reminding herself that pain could be temporary, even when it felt endless. That day, the courtyard was bright and crowded, sunlight bouncing off windows and lunch trays clattering onto tables. Maribel wheeled herself into her usual spot, setting her backpack at her feet and pulling out a book she barely read anymore, using it more as a shield than a source of comfort. She sensed movement behind her before she heard it, a ripple of snickering, shoes scuffing closer. Her shoulders tightened, and she focused on the fountain's steady splash, pretending she was somewhere else. The shove came suddenly, a rough jolt that sent her chair skidding sideways. Before she could react, hands grabbed the frame, lifting it just enough for gravity to do the rest. The wheelchair tipped and crashed onto the concrete, metal screaming in protest. Someone kicked it, another jumped onto it, and laughter exploded around her like fireworks. Maribel's body lurched forward, her palms scraping against the ground as she fought not to fall completely. Pain flared through her arms, but it was nothing compared to the hollow drop in her chest as she stared at the wreckage. The bullies scattered quickly when a lunch monitor appeared at the far end of the yard, leaving behind silence and debris. Maribel sat there in the open, sunlight exposing every tear she tried desperately to hide. Students slowed, stared, whispered, then walked on. A few looked sorry. None stopped. The wheelchair was beyond simple repair, its wheels bent inward, frame warped. It was not just transportation that had been destroyed, but her independence, her dignity, her sense of safety. She thought of her brother, Mateo Cruz, though she had no idea he was already on his way. Mateo was older by 8 years, a man shaped by discipline and distance. He had joined the military straight out of high school, driven by a need to protect others and escape the helplessness he had felt watching his sister struggle after the accident. Their phone calls were short but meaningful, full of shared silence and unspoken promises. Maribel rarely told him about the bullying, not wanting to be another burden in a life already heavy with responsibility. What she didn't know was that Mateo had been granted unexpected leave that very morning. The sun had barely risen when he decided to surprise his sister, to show up at her school during lunch with her favorite sandwich from the corner deli and a grin she hadn't seen in months. He wore civilian clothes, but his posture carried years of training, his eyes scanning instinctively as he walked onto campus. The cheerful noise of the courtyard faded the moment he saw the crowd gathered near the fountain. From a distance he recognized Maribel's hair, her small frame seated on the ground. His steps slowed, then quickened, heart pounding harder with every second. As he drew closer, the scene sharpened into painful clarity. The ruined wheelchair, the tears streaking his sister's face, the way she tried to wipe them away quickly as if ashamed. Something ancient and fierce ignited inside him, a protective force honed by years of restraint. Mateo reached her side, kneeling without a word, his presence blocking the stairs. He checked her arms, her hands, his movements gentle despite the storm raging behind his eyes. Maribel looked up, stunned, disbelief cutting through her grief. Relief washed over her, followed by the safety she hadn't realized she'd been craving all along. The world felt less hostile with him there, less sharp. Teachers finally arrived, voices raised, questions flying. But Mateo's focus never left his sister. He listened carefully as staff pieced together what had happened, noting names, faces, the way some students avoided his gaze. He didn't shout or threaten. He didn't need to. His calm carried weight, the kind forged in places where mistakes cost lives. News traveled fast through the school. The bullies were identified, their earlier laughter replaced by pale faces and trembling hands as administrators escorted them away. Parents were called, consequences followed swiftly and decisively, but punishment alone wasn't what changed the atmosphere. It was the presence of someone who refused to let cruelty slide quietly into memory. By the time an ambulance arrived to check Maribel, the courtyard had transformed. Students who had once passed by now stood watching, some wiping their eyes, others whispering apologies they hadn't known how to say before. Mateo helped Maribel onto a temporary transport chair, staying close, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. For the first time since she could remember, she didn't feel invisible. The school administration acted quickly, arranging for a replacement wheelchair and launching a full investigation. But something deeper had already shifted. Teachers spoke more openly about kindness and accountability. Students who had laughed now looked uncomfortable under the weight of collective awareness. Cruelty, once hidden in corners, had been dragged into the daylight, where it could no longer thrive unnoticed. Mateo spent the afternoon walking the halls with Maribel, helping her collect her things. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across lockers that suddenly seemed less imposing. He listened as she finally shared stories she had kept buried, moments of fear and isolation that had chipped away at her confidence. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply listened, honoring her pain by acknowledging it fully. When they left the school together, the day was still bright, the sky impossibly blue. The world hadn't magically become perfect, but it had become bearable again. Maribel felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest, a cautious hope. She realized she wasn't weak for needing help, and that strength could look like asking for support as much as standing alone. In the days that followed, the story spread beyond the school walls. Community members donated funds for a customized wheelchair, one stronger and more suited to Maribel's needs than the last. Notes of encouragement filled her mailbox. Strangers smiled at her in the hallway, not out of pity, but recognition. The bullies faced long-term consequences, required to attend counseling and participate in restorative programs that forced them to confront the harm they had caused. Maribel returned to school with her head higher, rolling smoothly through hallways that once felt like battlegrounds. The sunlight seemed warmer now, the daytime hours less threatening. She joined a student group advocating for accessibility and kindness, using her voice in ways she never thought possible. The pain of that lunch hour didn't disappear, but it transformed into fuel, pushing her toward a future shaped by resilience rather than fear. Mateo returned to duty shortly after, but something had changed in him too. He carried the knowledge that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought overseas, but right at home, in moments where standing up meant simply showing up. He called his sister more often, their conversations longer now, filled with laughter and plans instead of careful avoidance. If this story has touched your heart, if it made you feel anger at cruelty and hope in compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps stories like Maribel's reach others who may need strength today. And before the final moment fades, leave a comment sharing what kindness means to you, because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read. On a bright afternoon that began with destruction, a young girl learned she was not alone, and a community was reminded that true strength shows itself in the daylight, where empathy, courage, and love can finally be seen.